This is lesson 3-4, ratio and proportion, part 2. In the first part, we talked mostly with ratios and how to solve an equation and how to do unit analysis. In this part, we're going to look at a proportion. A proportion can be solved in one of two ways. I have two proportions here. They're both exactly the same, and we're going to solve them in two different ways. One way is that you multiply each side by the least common multiple. If I look at my denominator of 8 and 6, if I had to add 1/8 and 1/6, I'd have to get a common denominator. And the common denominator between 8 and 6, the lowest common denominator, is 24. 48 would work, but it's not the lowest common denominator, so I would prefer to use 24. So if I multiply both sides of my equation by 24, I can simply do this. I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 24. I'm going to multiply this side of the equation by 24. By doing that, I look at this. 8 divided into 24 3 times. So 3 times x now becomes 3x. 6 goes into 24 4 times, and 4 times 5 is 20. I should erase that. So I now have 3x equals 20. If I divide by 3, I want an exact answer here. If you remember, a fraction is an exact answer. A terminating decimal is an exact answer. A repeating decimal is not an exact answer. So don't tell me that this is 6.6 repeating. This is 6 2/3, or it's 20 over 3. So x is either equal to 6 2/3 or 20 over 3. I don't care which form you use, but make it an exact answer. And that was okay, but it seems to be a bit more complicated. The other way you could do it is something called using cross products. Using cross products means I'm simply going to multiply in a giant X, just like that. So if I multiplied in a giant X, I would multiply 6 times X, and that's going to equal, and I'll multiply by the other X, 8 times 5. So 6x equals 8 times 5 is 40. Divide each side by 6, and I would have x equals 40 over 6 reduces to 20 over 3. So it's 20 over 3, or again, 6 2/3. Same answer, different methods for solving. I actually prefer to use cross products more than anything else. Let's look at solving a few proportions here. We're going to solve this first proportion. Y over 3 equals 3 over 4. A proportion says the two ratios are equal. We know these are equal, so I'm going to multiply across. So I'm going to have 4 times y is going to equal, across the other way, 3 times 3. So essentially, 4y equals 9. Solve the equation, divide both sides by 4. So y equals 9/4, or the equivalent fraction or decimal, if there is a decimal that works. 4 goes into 9 2 times, with 1/4 left over, so 2 1/4, or 2.25. If we look at number 2, again, I'm going to cross multiply. Be careful of your negative sign. You only have one of them, so it only can go with one part of the problem. I'm going to take it with the 6 because I like to put it in my numerator. So like that. So I'm going to have 5 times w is going to equal 6 times 4.5. 5 times w is 5w, and 6 times 4.5 is 27. Okay, but I've got a negative 6, so I better put that in there. So 5 times w is 5w, so I have 5w equals negative 6 times 4.5 is negative 27. Now I'm going to take and divide this out. So I'll divide both sides by 5. So w equals negative 27/5. Okay. Or if I take and put it on my calculator, 27 divided by 5 is negative 5.4, which is the same as saying negative 5 2/5. Any of those would be acceptable answers because they're all exact answers. Now, if we look down a little bit further, you'll notice the proportions get a little bit different looking. We still can solve them the exact same way. We're still going to multiply our cross products. This is going to be multiplied by this. Okay, so we've got, but the thing that we've got to pay attention to is we're going to multiply. So we're going to multiply 4 times z minus 4. And that's going to equal 6 times z plus 3. Remember to put the z plus 3 and the z minus 4 in parentheses, or you'll only multiply by the first term and not the entire term. Okay, so 4 times, we're going to use distributive property, so we'll get 4 times z is 4z minus 16 equals 6z plus 18. We use the distributive property properly and distribute across. So 4z minus 16 equals 6z plus 18. Need to move all the z's to one side or the other, so I'm going to subtract 6z. I will get negative 2z minus 16 equals 18. I've got to get all my numbers on the same side, so I'm going to add 16 to both sides of the equation. And I have negative 2z equals 18 plus 16. 8 and 6 is 14, so 34. Divide by negative 2, and z will equal negative 17. And the last example. Again, we're going to cross multiply. So I will have 5 times w plus 6 equals 3 times w minus 4. Distribute 5w plus 30 equals 3w minus 12. To get all my variables on the same side, I'm going to subtract 3w from the right side and move it to the left side. So they cancel out on the right side. 5 minus 3 is 2w plus 30 equals negative 12. Subtract 30 from both sides of my equation. So 2w equals negative 42. Divide by 2. W equals negative 21. And I'm done. That's solving proportions.